I do them at tournaments, I do them in armor, and I do them out of armor. And I use these drills to kind of give me a baseline on some of the core things we do within fighting. So the first one I'll show you is a very, very easy drill. So before I do that, I'll just talk a little bit about the drills. So you can film any kind of drill, right? We could do a line drill here, developing a specific technique, wraps. Even though the drill was not made for video, you can still videotape a drill to see exactly where you're having your failures and your successes in your technique. Everything is videotapable, everything is reviewable. So it always helps to have a camera going when you're doing drills. So the way I do the drills is I'll typically always try and get it with an actual cameraman. Where the camera person is holding the camera, I envision that to be my opponent's eyes. So I'm thinking that is their head. So I will adjust my guard and what I'm doing based on this camera. So, like I said, Izzy's like this tall, so she'll come in like this, so it's like me fighting Sir Roland. And then other times, like Magnus, and he'll be up here, and it's like me fighting Mr. Alphared, right? So by diversifying where the camera is going to be, you can see how you're going to adapt to different situations. The first one is a really simple one. It's trying to get a picture of what you look like as you approach your opponent. So I love to see video of what I'm doing from the perspective of my opponent. So here's the start of it. Here's me in my guard, and this is what my opponent sees from across the air. I get to start to put together a picture of what he might be thinking he's going to do, what I need to do better, how I look, where's my openings, what I want to correct, what am I doing right, that kind of stuff. So in this drill, try and get the person you're filming completely within the frame. You can see my toes, you can see my head, and what's going to happen is I'm going to walk at the camera in a completely linear line in my guard. So what I'm looking for in this drill is my movement with my sword and shield. So one thing I look at when I'm fighting my opponent is people that don't do movement very well, or they lose their guard as they're moving. You'll see sometimes this, you'll see sometimes this, their guard starts to float. So I try and keep my guard tight and not give any huge glaring openings as I use movement to interact with my opponent. So here's what it looked like from the point of the cameraman. Pretty boring stuff. One thing I'm not really doing very well here is I've been completely static for about 20 feet now. So if they were just watching me like Thorin does, you get to put together a pretty accurate picture of what I'm doing. So there's not a lot of diversity in what I'm doing.
Now, when you're doing that drill, were you deliberately trying to walk like you would against an opponent, or were you just trying to walk?
I was trying to not have movement hurt my guard and hurt my positioning against my opponent. I wanted to make sure that as I close range with my opponent, whether it's from way out and into D, or from D into B or whatever, I want to make sure that as I dip and I bob with the normal sets of movement, that I'm not opening up any glaring things. Plus, like I said, I want to get an idea of what my opponent is seeing, so that I can start to put together a picture of what they might be thinking and where they might be going next. So I wasn't happy with how I looked in that last drill. So I looked at the camera as soon as it was done. I said, okay, let's do this again. I'm going to make some corrections to my guard, or we're going to film it over again. So the first correction I did was, when we look back at the first video, the top of my shield and my sword are completely parallel, which leaves a nice open slot. I really had my shield angled out quite a bit, so there was lots of offside open. I wasn't using it to effectively cover my body. So here's some corrections I make, and as soon as we're done, I'll go over yet some more I need to make. For instance, what the hell I'm doing with my arm over here, that's hanging out quite a bit. and the way my shield is angled is leaving quite a bit open. But here's the corrections I made, and me using them in my guard. You can see I kind of go back to the whole parallel and parallel. I make an adjustment there, and I'm still stalking my opponent. And there we go.
So you use side by side because that's one of the things we've seen as being effective is doing that real-time side-by-side analysis of here's what I did, I made a correction, here's the new version, and then playing side by side to see. Are you really side by side? I mean, I guess I'm just asking, have you seen much success from that technique yourself?
Typically saying, okay, so I did drill 1, and then I did drill 1B, which was after I made the corrections. Once I've made the corrections, I tend to throw out the previous one, and now I'm going to go off of what I just did and go to the next one. Because in my mind, rather those mistakes are going to carry through to the next video, or I'm going to have a whole new set of mistakes. Maybe that's something I need to look at, is doing more side-by-side. But typically speaking, I'm not ever 100% happy, so I think there's always something to correct.
What about in an instance like that one in particular, you know, like a real-time feedback where you actually flip up the screen of the camera and watch that as you're walking?
Yeah, that's a good point. You can do that real-time feedback.
Another great way to use side-by-side is if you're doing a drill like that, have a whole bunch of people doing it. If you get one of your really good fighters and you do it and you're kind of watching it and you say, "That's perfect, I want to be him." Put that up there and everybody else is going through the drill and you're doing it side-by-side. Let the vision they can have of somebody doing it really well.
Absolutely, that's a really good point.
The other thing side by side can get you is I took your video, I'd love to take that video, take it home, then do the exact same thing you were trying to do with the exact same shield, and then compare what it does for my body type versus your body type. There's those differences in the technique, you know, to understand the technique better and understand what I could do that you're not doing. So I do that with Thorne's tape when I get the paint from Thorne on. I go, oh, Thorne's stepping this way, and then I'm trying to look and say, this is how, you know, if I was stepping this way, this is what this would like, this movement. So that's where I think side by side has some ability to show you, gives you some insight into this stuff. I don't think it's necessarily great for driving better fighting, but you can get some good contrast and some quick feedback.
Yeah.
And it gives you some insight into what's happening. What was different? Not necessarily, oh, I've done this absolutely correctly, but okay, there's still this hole, but here's when I corrected this happened differently. And I think some of that side-by-side analysis is good. The other piece is if you can get some markup tools for your video, and you can say, okay, in this, I expect, you know, for snaps, for example, is having trouble sticking my snap low since I put it back. So I said, when I do the drill, my expectation is that take the liner, that this is going to end here, and then we'll end. So those are two great things that you can use on the video.
Definitely. When I was doing these drills, this was a solo effort, so I didn't bounce this off of anybody else. I simply filmed myself, reviewed myself, and did it as a solo effort. I think the real benefit is going to come in when you start collaborating with other people. When you take, you know, they give a line drill of 15 people doing this exercise, and then you can compare the videos, right? I don't think anybody's ever going to have the perfect defense, but, you know, if I can emulate somebody who has a really effective defense, that'll get me closer to point B. So on that same thought, the next drill is the same thing where I'm in my guard, I'm moving at the cameraman, we're trying to keep equal distance between us, but this time the cameraman is moving in completely different directions. So sometimes they're going back straight, sometimes they cut to the left, cut to the right, and now I'm watching myself react to what that camera person is doing. So if I'm on an Eric and the fighter's constantly moving around, am I not adjusting? Am I over adjusting? What does it look like when I adjust? All of those kind of questions. So we'll take a look here. So she starts to play with range a bit here, so she's coming in and out, and how I adjust to that. We could also break this down